despite all the destruction that has come in the wake of Black Lives Matter, they have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by some Norwegian member of parliament who seems to think that they've done a lot to forward peace over the last year. I don't know what news he was watching, but I guess probably establishment media news from America.
Probably CNN, the mostly peaceful protests of the BLM.
But and just to put this in perspective, I found this statistic from the U.S. Crisis Monitor. Black Lives Matter activists were involved in 95% of the riots that took place between June and September. And how they found that statistic was agitators arrested at Black Lives Matter protests and riots and, so forth. They all tended to be Black Lives Matter affiliated or members of a Black Lives Matter organization. So
and based on, this is a surmise on my point, or on my part rather, but I think it's probably fair. We all saw all of this violence occurring, and we know that a relatively small number of people were arrested for it.
Yes.
So one's got to believe that the people who were arrested were the more dramatic actors, right? The ones who were at least not guilty in a judicial sense, but perceived to be guilty of the more heinous activities during these events.
I, for one, definitely found that statistic to be shocking.
That's
because
huge.
I would expect there to be a lot of opportunists that have nothing to do with anything, that were just jumping in, but that's what the U.S. Crisis Monitor found. And so, Black Lives Matter now has a chance to win its Nobel Peace Prize. It'll join the likes of such great icons of peace as Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian terrorist, and
year one, Barack Obama.
Barack
Obama. Al Gore, who has done so much to advance peace. Le Duc Tho, the Vietnamese communist leader. So actually, when you think about it, Black Lives Matter kind of fits in perfectly with the rest of these.
What do all these people have in common?
Right.
Marxist ties, some strong tie to Marxist philosophy, every single one of them, including the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, but so going off on that, it seems to me that this is representative of the fact that the narrative on Black Lives Matter continues to be that it is a civil rights organization that is keeping the peace or trying to find peace. I believe net support for Black Lives Matter right now is at plus 10%. So, I mean, that's not crazy high numbers, but still, it's
not where it used to be. It used to be much higher than that even.
Yeah. Well, it definitely dropped off after the riots started. Yes. It was, much higher. But, it was at 8%, and now it's slowly climbing again. And I just wanted to throw this over to you guys and ask you, how do you think Americans will view the Black Lives Matter movement like a few decades from now? Because it seems like right now, there's not exactly a majority of them that understands it for what it really is.
There is a culture war, and the victors.
Depends on who wins.
The victor who wins, right?
That's exactly what I was thinking. No, that's exactly what I was thinking. It will be viewed the way that they are described, or it is described in history books and textbooks.
Right.
So they will be viewed, depending on who wins that culture war, either truthfully as, look, there are people involved in the organization Black Lives Matter who are sincere people of good conscience and trying to do the right thing, and they think they're involved with the organization to do the right thing. There's a history of I'm not saying anything nobody knows. There's a history of racial divide in this country that I don't want to say, I'm not going to say that whites need to take responsibility for, because that is taking it too far. Unless you perpetrated those acts, you should not take responsibility for those acts. But whites should acknowledge that, for instance, during the Martin Luther King Jr. era, when black churches marched for civil rights, white Americans should be aware of the fact that white churches should have been marching for civil rights, and we missed the mark. By we, I mean white churches. we need to acknowledge the fact that there shouldn't have been and should not now be white and black churches. There's no reason for that. That not that you integrate churches just to integrate them, but the history of that is something that everybody should be aware of. That the goal of the church has been missed over decades. And it should not have been a bunch of powerless black people like Martin Luther King Jr. and many of his supporters who called attention to this and demanded action from white Southern politicians. It should have been white voters, and eventually it was. It became more of a integrated movement over time. Yeah. But that should absolutely have started with the people who had the power to make the change in the first place, and it didn't. That's a problem. Is it my fault? No. Do I owe anybody anything for that? No, not in any tangible sense, but a little understanding on my part is probably not a bad thing. And I think a lot of people even reject that idea. Like, I was born in 1968. It was mostly done by that time, and therefore I don't even acknowledge that it's an issue. I think that we take that too far.